Caution, and 4 reasons why you don't want to be in ketosis for too long and the problems that can occur in the body.
So, time out. I think there's an element of science here, which is, hi, Dr. Eric Westman here with another Dr. Westman Reacts. This video is from Keto Camp. Ben Azadi is the leader there, and the video is 4 reasons why long-term ketosis is bad for you. Now, I met Ben at Keto Salt Lake. Keto Salt Lake is a meeting where people get together, listen to lectures about low-carb keto diets in Salt Lake City, put on by a company located there. So Keto Camp is teaching lots of people about the keto diet, has a massive following. And after listening to Ben speak at Salt Lake, I wanted to sign up for his program. He was very persuasive. And so let's see why Keto Camp, Ben Azadi, thinks long-term ketosis is bad for you.
Caution. If you're following the ketogenic diet, you're going to want to watch this video because I'm going to outline 4 reasons why you don't want to be in ketosis for too long and the problems that can occur in the body and how to practice keto flexing. Let's do this.
I looked up a little bit of information. Of course, you want to consider the source. Ben, I don't think has a medical degree. It was hard to figure out in a few minutes on the internet searching, but he has his own personal story of transformation. And so you always want to consider the source of information. If you're following someone who is typically in the gym and has used a keto diet to be a bodybuilder, their information and teaching may be different than if you're trying to reverse diabetes, for example. So if you end up in an office like my office at Duke, and you have a metabolic problem, you're trying to reverse diabetes, obesity, PCOS, anything related to insulin resistance, then you're going to want to, I think, be a little cautious about using information from someone who doesn't have that clinical background. Although what he's done for himself clearly has worked, and he's teaching lots of other people. There is what's called selection bias, meaning people who gravitate toward him are more likely to respond to the technique. A doctor over time tends to winnow out those who don't like the doctor. Will go find other doctors. Have you done that? So you'll always want to ask yourself, who's telling me this information? How did they get to this speaker or influencer situation? And then what data or what science and clinical experience goes a long way, but it's not as good as formal science supports the position that they're taking. So that said, let's see why Ben says long-term ketosis is bad for you.
Hey Keto Camper, Ben Azadi here, best-selling author and the founder of Keto Camp. This video is going to be very informative for anybody who's doing keto because I'm going to outline these 4 problems that can occur with long-term ketosis. We're going to talk about how long-term keto can impact your thyroid health, your testosterone health, estrogen, sex hormone binding globulin, and actually slow down your weight loss results. And then at the end of the video, I'm gonna give you 2 strategies to practice keto flexing that are outlined in my brand new book, Keto Flex, which actually just released today, and you can get this over at ketoflexbook.com. So without further ado, let's get into these 4 reasons why we don't wanna be in ketosis for too long. I know it could sound a little bit crazy coming from somebody like me who loves keto. I have ketosis on my shirt. My company's Keto Camp, but here's the deal. Keto is not a diet. Keto is a metabolic process, and guess what? It's been around since humans have existed. Every single one of our ancestors did keto, but when they had the opportunity, they flexed out of ketosis. They didn't see tubers and fruit and honey and say, oh, we don't eat that, bro, we're keto. No, they would eat that, they would flex out and then go back into ketosis. The human body is designed to do that. We are still hardwired in all 70 trillion cells to go in and out of ketosis. So the goal here is to teach your body to burn fat as the primary fuel source, but not the only fuel source. We want to be able to shift back and forth between fat and glucose without a hiccup. And I'm going to show you how to do that. Before we get into those principles, let's start with the number one reason why we don't want to be in ketosis too long.
Well, I guess just to comment on the looking back to history, I've kind of just watching in horror as people talk about, well, the teeth of humans, therefore we are designed to eat, plants or because of ancestral eating, we ought to eat a certain way. If Orville and Wilbur Wright had examined all of the research and clinical trials and publications and even human history, they would have concluded that powered air travel is never not human. And yet they went forward with experimental research, and yes, it started without a randomized trial. There is a role for doing things without randomized trials. But so to say that with such confidence that we're meant to go in and out of ketosis, and saying that therefore that's better for us or a reason not to go into ketosis doesn't really make sense to me. Does it make sense to you? We could actually go beyond the historical view. Looking back, we might even be able to do better than what we've had available before, is the way I think about it.
Consuming a low amount of carbohydrates over the long term is a good thing. It will cause your body to burn excess body fat and improve your overall health. But there's one important caveat. A constant, unrelenting state of ketosis in which your body is burning its own fat for fuel is obviously unsustainable. Why? Because eventually you have no more fat to burn. Well, I'm going to explain.
Well, hang on. You eat fat, and you burn the fat that you eat. So I didn't catch this point that, in my patients, people I teach, yes, it's a well-formulated sort of program. You don't want to do internet keto without some good basic knowledge of what to eat, and protein comes first. But to say that you're going to whittle away to nothing is not what I see in my clinical practice. So people lose fat off their body, but then they eat fat and they burn the fat they eat. You become a fat eater and a fat burner. You don't eat carbs, you'll burn fat, but you don't whittle away to nothing. This is kind of an odd statement that it sounds kind of like he had to come up with some sort of logic that it's illogical. You don't burn all your fat and it goes down to zero, and then you have nothing to burn because you eat. So assuming that you're still eating, you're not going to whittle away to nothing.
Why this keto lifestyle should be a lifestyle and not just a strict diet that is not sustainable. My mantra is lose the excess fat, treasure the necessary fat. Ketosis is a brilliant strategy for accomplishing the first goal. As for the second goal, prolonged ketosis doesn't have an automatic shutoff valve. If you remain in the state of ketosis for too long, burning your own fat, then your body will keep doing that as long as it must do to stay alive. If necessary to preserve life, once your excess body fat is gone, various bodily functions will shut off or become minimized. This process of shutting down will continue until Mr. Death knocks on your door and says, "Sorry buddy, time's up." Nobody wants that. Let's start with the first reason why we don't want to be in ketosis for too long. Fat burning will slow down. Here's why. As levels of body fat drop, your primal brain, whom we thought we had trained to accept high fat diet and fasting, will be aroused and begin to object. Why and when will this happen? Well, your primal brain, the eternal watchdog, will sense that your reserves of fat are becoming depleted. Remembering those long periods of deprivation thousands of years ago, your primal brain will sound the alarm. The fat supply is running low. It will issue the command that your body must preserve its precious fuel source. In response, your body will actually slow down fat burning, all for the sake of survival. When you stay in ketosis for too long, the body starts to rebel and conserve its fuel source. A good analogy for you is if you lived out in the woods and you stored about 500 logs of firewood to heat up your cabin for the winter. These were your reserves because you could still go out and chop more firewood. So if you had to dip into these reserves, you wouldn't be worried. But now it's early March and snow still covers the ground. It's been a tough winter and you haven't harvested many trees. And you see that you've only got about 50 logs left. That's a very low supply. Suddenly you're reluctant to use them because you don't want to run out. When you had 500 logs, You didn't care about burning them. The same thing happens with your body fat. This is why when you stay low carbohydrate for too long, your body will slow down fat metabolism. And you know what? This is a good thing. There's a big difference between losing excess fat and losing all your fat. You want to lose excess fat, but your body needs a small amount of fat, and your primal brain is smart to insist that you meet this minimal requirement. So the innate intelligence will actually insert water into the cells to slow down fat metabolism, and you might develop this dimply fat around your midsection when you're in ketosis for too long. Not good. So what happens is having a keto flex day, and I'm gonna
So, time out. So, I think there's an element of science here, which is that everyone, as you lose weight, you lose fat mass. That as an obesity medicine doctor, we think of weight loss as fat loss, not water, not muscle. We want to target the fat mass and get the fat to go away. And ketosis does that. If you have extra body fat, you'll use it. But all weight loss diets, no matter how you do it, will have a reduction in metabolism that goes along with it. That's what he's trying to explain, I think, the metabolic change that happens as you're losing weight. And yes, the extreme is your body's freaking out, it thinks you're starving, it turns off the metabolism, but then the other extreme, you go into starvation mode and it won't work. No, you can't turn the metabolism down to zero. And so in 2 studies now from the Harvard group, this is David Ludwig's group, they showed an elegant research that the metabolic rate goes down when you're losing weight, losing fat mass, but comparing different ways of doing it, different dietary approaches, the metabolism goes down less on a low-carb diet compared to a higher carb, roughly the same calories. So that in my clinic, I may have explained to you that yes, the metabolism slows down. That's a response. That's okay. I reassure you that you still want to be in ketosis to burn that fat. But I suppose if Ben's clients want as fast as possible the weight loss to happen, then this might be a concern. So there's a trade-off. I want to teach you a lifestyle approach, not getting possible trigger foods to get you back. So it's a selection bias in a lot of ways. If you come to me in a clinical situation trying to reverse diabetes and other metabolic problems, then you have to be careful about foods that will trigger you to go back to those carbs, so that flexing, going out of ketosis, or the term in and out of ketosis, metabolic flexibility is where that comes from, would not be such a good thing. And you want to just kind of understand that the fat burning is going to slow down a little bit. That happens on any weight loss approach, rather than, okay, let me go back to carbs and risk going. I've seen people lose 50 pounds from July to December and then regain the 50 pounds back, in the next half of the year, because they got sucked back into eating carbohydrates, which is a concern if you're going to be going in and out of ketosis on purpose. I'm not yet convinced that ketosis is bad for you. Are you? Let's keep going.
Show you 2 ways to do that later on in the video, but having a keto flex day introduces your buddy coming over and dumping all this firewood for you. Now you're going to be more inspired to ramp up the burning. It's going to remind your body that it's not starving, that you have a different fuel source, which is going to be glucose, for a short period of time.
I see. So in that metaphor of the house, the cabin in the woods, and you have wood, eating the carbs, he's saying, is bringing in the wood no, eating the carbs is like bringing in paper, and you have to burn, and then it's fast energy. But the metaphor we use is that the log is the fat on your body, and paper is kind of like carbs. You eat quick energy, but then it goes away. So if you're running your body on carbs, it's like fueling your cabin in the woods on newspapers and having to remember those newspapers or magazine. Remember magazine, some sort of quick-acting sort of paper as a fuel, and then alcohol is like lighter fluid. It's so fast you burn it. It's not forbidden, but you don't want to have much of it. So I see he's using the log or firewood as a metaphor for any kind of energy. I think it even goes further, so that once you're a fat burner, it's more like you're going to the oil thermostat on the wall and you're turning on the oil to heat. You don't have to worry. That's running your body on fat. You don't have to go out even to get logs and fuel the fireplace very often, because you're running on oil, your heater, or your body's running on fat and ketones. That's where keto comes from, actually. It's fat burning, and a little bit of the fat gets turned into ketones. Because it's something you can measure, the name keto got out there because it's something you can drink, and you can, all these new kind of products. But really, Ben's right that ketosis is a metabolic state. It's not a food. There is no keto food. It's a metabolism. But I'm not yet convinced that it's bad for you. Metabolism goes down however you lose weight, and I'm concerned if you have an addictive element toward these carbs, that having this every now and then a flex day or a carb day might knock you off. I've seen that happen, and then you have trouble getting back on the plan.
So having a keto flex day and flexing out of ketosis is a great way to break a keto plateau, a keto stall, and ramp up the fat burning. I know it sounds counterintuitive, but I gotta tell you, it works like a charm. Second reason why we don't wanna be in ketosis for too long, this is especially important for you ladies out there, but also for men, thyroid problems. Hormone production is often a function of a chain of command, as orders are passed from one organ to another until the desired outcome is achieved. It's this amazing orchestra. For example, the hypothalamus and pituitary gland, which are located in the brain, help control the thyroid gland, which is a butterfly-shaped gland located at the base of your throat, just below the Adam's apple. To provide their direction to the thyroid, the hypothalamus releases thyrotropin-releasing hormone, TRH, which stimulates the pituitary gland to release thyroid-stimulating hormone, TSH. When the hypothalamus and pituitary are working normally, they respond. When thyroid hormone levels are too low, they secrete more TRH and TSH, which stimulates the thyroid to make more hormones. When thyroid hormones are too high, they secrete less TRH and TSH, which reduces hormone production by the thyroid. The primary secretory product is inactive, which is thyroxine, T4, which is a pro-hormone. This needs to be converted to T3 peripherally by the tissues with high blood flow, including the liver and kidneys. In the body, T4 is converted to T3, and that is used by the cells. The T3 hormone is important for fat burning, for longevity. It's so important that every single cell in your body has T3 hormone receptor sites. T4 can't say the same thing. It needs to be activated and converted.
I just need to say that was your biochemistry lesson for the day. It's reading straight from the textbook.
To T3. Diet can influence thyroid hormone levels, and prolonged ketosis and severe calorie restriction can lead to reduced thyroid function or hypothyroidism, which is a mechanism to ensure survival in response to perceived famine. The goal is to slow down metabolism, preserve energy, and preserve vital organs. So we mentioned T4 is inactive. It needs to be converted to T3. Do you know which hormone helps make this conversion? Insulin. Low thyroid hormones cause a drop in insulin, the hormone needed to transport sugar from the blood to different cells throughout the body. Chronically low levels of insulin slow down cellular function, including muscle contraction and basic brain function. Over longer periods of time, low insulin levels compromise this T4 to T3 hormone conversion, which can cause you to feel sluggish. Your cells are producing less energy, you're burning less fat, you don't feel as good. So having a keto flex day will give you that healthy insulin spike to make these hormonal conversions, T4 to T3, but also help with progesterone, estrogen, and testosterone.
So there we're getting an element of the old paradigm where if it changes a thyroid level or if your metabolism slows, it's bad. Maybe not. Maybe it gives you efficiencies that you didn't get before. As I was thinking about this, now this probably went by if you've never heard about the thyroid metabolism. It is pretty complicated, and that's why most of us kind of glaze over. You may have talked to you about this, and your eyes glaze. Just tell me what to take thyroid-wise. You can replace thyroid, and with pills. But I'm beginning to see now that a lot of this has to do with communication and language, and here and what we can measure. And so when we're focusing on a thyroid level, and that's what we've measured in people who eat carbs, and we treat a normal, abnormal level, it's actually going to be more complicated than that, I think. And I think we're measuring things that made sense in the old paradigm. Remember, if there are ketones in the blood, the doctor's going to tell you that's abnormal, because it's not normal for people who eat carbohydrates to have ketones in the blood. And so the lab tests are going to look different in many different ways. We call it the new normal. And the language used before may not be the language that we use, 10 years from now. I hope we talk less about the glucose in the blood and talk more about the ketones in the blood. But see, it's not easy to measure. Well, you can get a meter, and I typically discourage the use of that. But what I'm trying to say is we measure what we can measure, and often the blood is the only thing we can measure, but it's not really telling us the whole story. You really want to know what's going on inside the cells, and it's really difficult to get a glimpse of what's inside the cell unless you take a biopsy of it, take part of it, and then have the right sort of analytic tools. So it occurred to me that this is almost like speaking a different language, and even now we don't know exactly what to measure. I'm told that in some languages there's 7 ways to say snow, because in that part of the world it could be wet snow, it could be dry snow, it could be great snow to go out and have fun in, and so I don't even understand all the different types of the name for snow. There are 5 different words for love in some languages, and what we're not measuring all of the things that have to do with ketosis and health yet, I don't think. So we're talking a language of thyroid, testosterone levels, and all that, and they may change, but just because they change, and it all has to do, like he's right, with the communication inside the body, these may not be the only words to describe, only hormones to describe what's going on. Ketones actually are a hormone. We're learning now that ketones have hormonal effects, anti-inflammatory effects. So I see that I think Ben's trying to make sense of what experts are saying based on the old paradigm view. And then there are a lot of different ways to do a keto diet. And if you don't really need a keto diet to reverse diabetes or other serious metabolic issue, I think this kind of program that he's talking about is probably fine. I'll review in the next video the Keto Flex program, but I don't see yet a reason not to be in ketosis. And my fear is that, or there are going to be a lot of ways to do this, and this is great. I'm happy that Keto Camp is teaching lots of different people, but if you're finding, you found a car that you like and you're driving it, this doesn't make me tell you not to be in ketosis or to change what you're doing. You don't have to get a new car yet, based on what he said. So, but this was really only the second reason. Let's keep going.
Number 3 reason why we don't want to be in ketosis for too long: testosterone deficiency.
So again, the testosterone level is different. The thought that occurs to me is ask the carnivore diet proponents, Sean Baker and Ken Berry, about their thoughts about testosterone. They don't eat carbs, they're in ketosis on a carnivore diet, and their testosterone is fine. You can just look at them and see that. But a little bit of selection bias in that if you're teaching lots of people who actually don't need keto level kinds of diets, I think this is fine. In my latest book, End Your Carb Confusion, we teach 3 different levels of carbs, and they're not all ketosis based. You might be surprised to hear that, but I think there are a lot of ways to be healthy. You don't have to be a meat eater. You can do this being a plant-based eater. but there's certain nutritional elements that you need to have in your daily or at least weekly sort of food intake. But I think Keto Doc approved with the general idea of ketosis, not approved in terms of ketosis is bad for you, and yet what he's talking about is being kind of in ketosis most of the time, which is going to be better, restricting the carbohydrate damage in general over a longer period of time. I'd like to see a study. I didn't see any sort of documented more than one person, although he might have lots of different people with feedback through clinical experience, that we call that, and that's one level of information, which means for some people it can work. It doesn't tell us about taking all comers. What about the people for whom this didn't work, or it was people got hooked back onto their fruit addiction and then they derailed them and they regained the weight. So if you're in a program, for example, you're going to be less apt to fall off and be lost for 6 months, because you're coming back to have the accountability or the feedback from people, the support, and support can be key for long-term sustainability of any sort of nutritional dietary approach. What Keto Flex means, and it's a book that he's written, and it talks about in general terms adding back carbs every now and then, which is interesting. If your metabolism is flexible already, and you're in a group of folks who are not, so the selection bias, a group of folks who are not trying to reverse diabetes, reverse severe metabolic issues that have to do with insulin resistance, then you might not have to be in ketosis all the time or for an extended period of time. If you have sugar and ultra-processed food addiction, though, if you end up staying away from fruit, for example, or pasta, rice, potatoes, any of those things, and over the holiday you have a little bit of it and then you get back into carbs and you can't stop eating them, that's a sugar and ultra-processed food addiction, and I would not recommend having a flex day or adding carbs back in, which is what we're going to learn about. So, but if you're able to tolerate carbs here and there, you don't have an addictive element toward it, this might be legitimate. I mean, let's see if there's any science behind it or what the experience is. Again, this is Keto Camp.
So the first way to practice keto flexing, it's a 7-day protocol. You might be thinking, how long in ketosis is too long? Well, the way that I teach it in my book here, I outline the 4 pillars. Number 1, which is the first pillar, is called adapt. We're getting your body fat adapted. We're getting you into ketosis safely, no keto flu required. The second pillar is called fast. We're practicing intermittent fasting strategies. The third pillar is called phase. We're phasing out all anti-nutrients and actually practicing carnivore. Those 3 pillars is going to take you about 60 days, 6-0, and then you have unlocked the Keto Flex pillar. So that's how long, too long. 60 days in ketosis, and then we practice keto flexing. The first way to do it, this is a 7-day protocol. I like this approach for somebody when they reach this point in their journey.
So he's basically described the first 60 days of a keto diet. There are a lot of different ways to do it, and you could cut all the carbs out at once. You could gradually take them down. Lots of different approaches. You can go 29 days strict, and then say you're going to have something on the 30th day, but by the 30th day you don't want any carbs. By then all the cravings are gone. But then in the prior video, which I was not really very persuaded by, he brings in this language of why you don't want to be in ketosis more than 60 days. I've had people in ketosis for years, especially if you're trying to reverse type 2 diabetes or you have hundreds of pounds of weight to lose. Please don't add back carbs in after 60 days. So again, this is a selection bias toward what you're trying to accomplish. What is the influencer, writer, or teacher teaching? Where is his or her experience? And what kind of clients or patients are they seeing? My first kind of response is that this would be for people who are not looking for advice from a doctor in a clinical setting. So these are folks who are in keto camp, probably aren't on a lot of medicines. The average age is probably pretty young. So in that demographic, you can do lots of different things. In fact, some people don't even need to be in ketosis at all, I don't think, and yet it can be okay and compatible with good health. So what he's presenting here is let's do 60 days to feel what ketosis is like. You might also notice that your joint pain's gone, your heartburn's gone, all these other increased energy, the non-scale victories we talk about. But then what happens after that time? Let's see what he has to say.
To lose, or maybe they already hit their goal weight, this is a good protocol for you. It's called the 5-1-1, developed by Dr. Daniel Pompa. 7-day protocol. Here's how it works. 5 days out of the week, you're going to be practicing your favorite intermittent fasting schedule. During your eating window, you're going to eat keto-friendly meals, keeping your total carbohydrates below 50 grams for the day, and you want to be in ketosis for those 5 days. Ideally, you don't want to eat more than 2 meals in your eating window on those 5 days. The first one, I should say, is your 24-hour water fast. I love a 24-hour water fast because you get more fat loss, more autophagy, and it really resets your gut. There was a great study, I wrote about it in my book, Keto Flex, a study at MIT that showed a 24-hour water fast strengthened intestinal stem cells. So you get this super gut healing restorative effect with the 24-hour fast. That 24-hour fast can be dinner to dinner, lunch to lunch, or even breakfast to breakfast. This leaves us to the final one in the 5-1-1, which is your Keto Flex day. On this day, you don't practice fasting. You're gonna have your breakfast, lunch, and dinner. You're gonna lower your fat below about 30 grams for the day, and you're going to increase your healthy carbohydrates and protein to remind the body that it's not starving, to give it an alternate fuel source, which is glucose, and get insulin to make those hormonal conversions, and to reset those receptor sites for leptin. So you wanna have about 100 to 150 grams of healthy carbs on this day, total for the day. And you also want to increase your protein. You want more of this mTOR pathway, which is an anabolic pathway. That's your flex day. And then if you've done this the right way, you should be right back into ketosis within 24 to 48 hours. That right there is true metabolic freedom and flexibility.
So, interesting. I would like to see a paper. I would like to, there isn't one. A lot of theory going on in terms of the autophagy, and while that it really kind of makes sense, I'm left with, while this is kind of complicated, what's the incremental benefit beyond what I typically teach already, which is stay under 20 total carbs per day, eat when you're hungry, don't eat when you're not. If it's intermittent fasting, you eat 1 meal a day, that's great. You don't have to call it that, but you probably will be doing that. So what's interesting, when we were teaching, and it's interesting, you know, I didn't come up with the low-carb diet or the 20-gram rule. The information that we gleaned was from doctors who were using low-carb keto diets from 1970 to 2000, and thousands, probably hundreds of thousands of patients actually. And then our role was to do research, to publish papers going back now 20 years ago, doing this method and publishing the research, even in people who for whom it didn't work, or you know, those who, it's not just selection bias of those people who were able to do it. We also included people who were not able to do it. So the studies on intermittent fasting and even prolonged fasting really haven't been done to the point of quality and quantity, you know, number of people in there. And the concern about long-term fasting, or even a day long, you know, I'm not worried about that, except, you know, do I have to do it? Is my question now. Or, you know, what's the incremental benefit beyond what I'm already doing is the question I have. And it sure seems kind of complicated to keep track of all these things. I'm not, you know, you might want to do that, but I don't want to. So far, I just haven't seen enough research on the ideas that are presented here. A lot of basic science. The MIT study was not a randomized trial of comparing something in intact humans over a long period of time. That's what we really want to have. And for those people who really don't need ketosis to reverse the metabolic problem, I think this is probably fine. I just kind of wonder to what extent, what is the incremental benefit, how much bang for your buck, so to speak, of doing something that seems rather complicated, but that's your choice. And if the idea of bringing back carbs up to 100, 150 carbs per day, and I'm glad he used total, not net. We always talk total carbs, not net carbs in our teachings. If that doesn't throw you off the rails and make you go back to eating carbs and gain weight, you're out of control, this might be reasonable. But again, where's the study in real people? I don't know. I would value, even although it would be selected people, a clinical experience. Let's say a keto camp had thousands or even hundreds of people who are following a certain way, and we've done surveys of people who say they're doing something, and I think that's a valid place to start. Of course, it doesn't tell you about the people who were unable to do it, or people who had side effects and fell out and didn't stay in the survey. And I'm always wondering about those folks, but I suppose if you try it and it's not right for you, you'll know and you won't continue it. Okay, so that's another way to kind of fine tune and have some carbs one day a week with a day-long water fast, and I'm still looking for that paper.
Now there's a second way to practice keto flexing. It's called the 4-2-1 rule. It's a 7-day protocol. Here's how it works. 4 days out of the week, you're gonna be practicing your favorite intermittent fasting schedule. Whether that's a 16-hour fast or an 18-hour fast, it's up to you. During your eating window, you don't wanna have more than 2 meals. Make it keto-friendly meals, keeping your total carbs for those days below 50 grams. So you wanna be in ketosis. The 2 in the 4-2-1 is a 48-hour water fast where you just go, let's say, Monday night to Wednesday night. You wanna give yourself 48 hours of fasting, just water and some sea salt. That's gonna help you burn a lot of excess fat. That's gonna help you get more autophagy and heal the gut. This is a good protocol, the 4-2-1, for somebody who has about 10 pounds to 25 pounds to lose. The 1 in the 4-2-1, same rules apply. It's your keto flex day. Higher healthy carbs, no fasting. You wanna hit about 100 to 150 grams of healthy carbs, more protein, and keep your total fat for that day below 30 grams. I outline this in detail in Keto Flex, which you can order right now on paperback or Kindle and get it today. Head to ketoflexbook.com. In the book, I also talk about the 3-3-1 rule. There's also a chapter 12, all about how to do keto and fasting for women. There's a chapter on sleep. Look, I believe this is the greatest book on keto ever written. You're gonna love it. There's a link down below for you to get it. And if you do get it and read it, please leave it a rating and review on Amazon. If this video was helpful, thumbs up.
I've seen Ben speak. We were at the same meeting, Keto Salt Lake. And after the talk, I wanted to go out and buy his stuff because very, very persuasive. And yet I'm left with is it worth all of that effort? What else am I going to get? It's still all very theoretical. And while it may not be necessary, and it's kind of my view of all of the fasting protocols, intermittent fasting, as long as the carbs are low, it's going to work. And but the extent to which do you have to do that? No. So if you're doing intermittent fasting or some other fasting sort of approach and it's hard and you can't remember what to do, you try a simpler approach. That's my philosophy. But I guess in general I would give the Keto Camp, Keto Flex an approval, but may not be necessary. Sounds kind of difficult to me, but it may be something you might want to try. But if you have sugar and ultra-processed food addiction, beware that adding in carbs, even things like nuts and extra cheeses and things like that, can throw you off. And being in a supporting program will help you get back on if you do have some carbs. But I can see how this may be helpful for some people. Show me some data still, and then I can, maybe endorse it as a policy, but until then, it seems reasonable. But I really can't say, yeah, go do it. It has all this data behind it, like other approaches do. So I hope that's helpful. If you like it, please like, subscribe, ring the notification bell, send to a friend. This is a grassroots effort. If you enjoyed this video, be sure to like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell, and check out adaptyourlifeacademy.com.